Hi, everyone. Welcome to Compassion in Action. Today, we're speaking with Dianne Waltner, a Wichita-based animal activist, author, vegan, recent graduate of our animal chaplaincy program, and human guardian to a wonderful feline soul named Mandy. Welcome, Dianne. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much, Elaine. It's a real honor to be here.
Well, first, I'd like to ask you about your book, Evolving into Wholeness, A Journey into Compassion. In it, you mentioned there was a great disconnect between the peace testimony of the Mennonite faith you were brought up in and the violence that was done to animals in your family poultry hatchery. What was it that woke you up to the cruelty that had literally been in front of you all those years?
Well, there weren't really any specific incidences that I can remember. It was more of a gradual awakening. And while I was still at home and working in the hatchery, it was not something that I really wanted to think about. You just kind of numb. You get pretty numbed pretty quickly, unfortunately, when you have to do these things. And I thought it was necessary because I thought we needed to eat meat, and I thought, this was just necessary evil, what we had to do at the hatchery, but I didn't know that there was an alternative. After I left home and after I started thinking about things, and I wasn't involved in the middle of it anymore and wasn't working at the hatchery, it was easier to look back on it and see, all of the cruelty was so unnecessary, and we don't have to have animals to eat. And so that's what I started questioning. If we're such a peaceful, peace-loving people, that this just didn't seem quite right to cause all that suffering.
It's interesting that you got a clearer perspective the further away you were from it. Also, in your book, you're very upfront about your addiction to drinking as a way to deal with the inner pain you experienced from bullying as a child and as a young adult. Why do you think addiction of any substance is so stigmatized in our society, and what can we do to help change that viewpoint?
Well, that's a good question. I don't really know. I mean, it's always been stigmatized, and I have to admit that I used to look down on people who use drugs and alcohol and, think, why can't they control themselves, or why do they do these stupid things? And then I found myself, when I was drinking, I would find myself thinking, why did I do that? Why can't I stop my drinking? Why can't I why can't I stop after one or two drinks? So I felt that there must be something wrong with me, like I had previously thought that there must be something wrong, something defective with these people who were addicted. And I think that's that's a common idea, and there's so much shame involved with it. And I was so ashamed of myself. And when I was writing the book, I really debated about how much to even disclose, because I was worried about what people would think of me. But as they say, you're only as sick as your secrets. So I felt that it was important to talk about some of these things. Plus, I really wanted to normalize sobriety and to normalize talking about our struggles with addiction, because I want to help to destigmatize it, because I know a couple of friends who I lost, one to death and one to dementia, largely because they were too ashamed to talk about their drinking and too ashamed to get help, or didn't want to get help. But I think if they had been able to talk about it, it would have been a little easier for them to save their lives. And we can't solve a problem that we can't discuss. So that was part of my reason in writing the book. And I think that we need to just recognize that the addict is a person, and that their drinking or using is just their coping mechanism. We all have coping mechanisms, and some of us just choose mechanisms that are more harmful and less helpful. So we can relearn those. But I think, it's because I still struggle with eating, especially sugar. So I still have some of those coping mechanisms. But I think it's important to be non-judgmental and to be willing to listen. And for those who are struggling, to be willing to talk about our struggles with addiction.
Well, you also mentioned that you became a vegan before you became sober. How did your veganism help you on the path to sobriety?
Well, when I was drinking, I drank a lot to cope with the painful feelings, and I had a lot of painful feelings related to the cognitive dissonance I felt, feeling that I should be, that I was a compassionate person, yet here I was contributing to all the suffering and death of all these animals that I was eating and their animal products that I was consuming. And so once I stopped doing that, that did give me a tremendous sense of inner peace. And so that helped reduce my need for the alcohol to deal with painful feelings. And then the compassion for animals that I had felt for animals, I was starting to feel for myself as well. That was a little harder to come, but I began to be a little concerned about my health because I was having some symptoms and some blood work that said that maybe I should reconsider my drinking, because what I really wanted to do, I felt really called to help speak out for the animals. And I knew that I needed to be healthy to do that. And I didn't want to follow the footsteps of my friends. And so I thought, I had something to live for now. I didn't want to die. And so working for the animals became a cause that was more important to me than drinking.
That compassion for animals, that vegan compassion, how do you these days extend that to humans?
Well, and that's where the animal chaplaincy training will be helpful, because I do want to be available to help people cope with the loss of their animal companions, and to work with them to create funerals or memorials and to process the grief after the loss. I would also like to be available to provide a safe space for anyone else who has been involved in animal exploitive industries, whether it's in factory farming or farming at all, or research or any other things, because to help them deal with any grief or guilt or shame that they may be feeling, then provide emotional and spiritual support for anyone going through that transition, because I know how painful it is. There for a lot of years, I wouldn't talk to anybody, even when I was starting to become active in the animal rights movement. I wouldn't talk to any of my activist friends about my background because I was too ashamed and too afraid that I would be condemned for what I had done, because I had seen activists do that to other former animal exploiters. And so I want to be available for anybody who is trying to deal with the guilt and shame of working in those industries and trying to escape it. Then I also want to continue my education to learn other ways to help. And I'm registered for an animal companion end-of-life doula certification program and an animal Reiki level 1 training. And while those are obviously more working with the animals, having that knowledge will certainly be helpful to humans as well, and to help with the end-of-life discernment issues. And then also, finally, just compassion for other addicts. Life is hard, and we all need some way to cope with the stresses of life. And I would venture to say that we all have used some harmful coping mechanisms at times. And as I mentioned, I'm still struggling with food, especially sugar addiction. And I did briefly experiment with a few other drugs, but since alcohol was convenient, that quickly became my drug of choice. But I think we just need to have compassion for everyone.
Well, I think there's a lot of lucky humans and a lot of fortunate animals waiting in your future ministry. Also, I guess one last question. How are you planning to incorporate your chaplaincy training into your actual animal activism?
Well, I've been invited by my minister at my Unity Church to do a church service in October. So I'm working on that. And I will also be working with her on a Blessing of the Animals service the week following my service. So I'm thinking about creating a presentation for that would be easily adaptable to other faith traditions, and offering it to present it to other churches, starting particularly seeing if I could interest, the Unitarian Universalist Church, because I was actively involved there for a number of years as well. Then I'm also a vegan lifestyle coach and educator through Main Street Vegan Academy, which I also highly recommend. It's a wonderful program. And I have included information about that on my website as well as my chaplaincy. And so I'm hoping that people who come to the website in search of chaplaincy information will also see then the veganism coaching information and maybe be interested. Maybe that will help open the door to them to consider compassion, expanding their compassion to other animals. So I'm also available to help people in their vegan journeys, as well as anything related directly to the chaplaincy.
Well, Dianne, thank you so much for being with us again, and thank you for sharing your wisdom. And I personally can attest to your effectiveness as a chaplain. You helped me greatly during the loss of my little dog. And I know you're going to help so many other people and animals.
Thank you
Reverend
so much.
Sarah, you're welcome.